IGN's PlayStation podcast, Podcast Beyond.
Hey, hey.
And Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox podcast, Podcast Unlocked.
Always a pleasure, Damon.
Always a pleasure for you both, for me to see you both. And today we're discussing the question, where is the PlayStation 5 Pro? It's long been rumored. Specs have allegedly leaked, and for looking back at PlayStation's history, this is about the time in the generation when they do release a mid-gen refresh, and yet we're left John Travolta gift wondering, where is PlayStation 5 Pro? So bear with me, I have a bit of a preamble here, and then I'll bring in Max and Ryan for their thoughts. In February of this year, analysts reported that they anticipate Sony will release a PlayStation 5 Pro in the latter half of 2024. We are in the latter half of 2024 right now. Looking back at the history of when they've released mid-gen refreshes, PlayStation 2 was out in 2000, the PS2 Slim was out in 2004, PS3 is 2006, the PS3 Slim was 2009, PS4 was 2013, and the PS4 Slim and Pro were both out in 2016. PlayStation 5 will turn 4 this November. Then, of course, there's the important detail that Grand Theft Auto 6 is expected next year. By all accounts, that could be a game that could really push the current-gen systems, and maybe, that could be a real selling point for Sony and why people might want to buy a PlayStation 5 Pro so that they can play GTA 6 with the highest settings. Sony has also said that the PS5 is already in the latter stage of its life cycle. And in April of this year, sources told The Verge that developers are being asked to optimize their games for the new console, and that improved ray tracing is a significant focus. Now, of course, Sony recently held their summer State of Play. That would have been a great time to announce the PlayStation 5 Pro, although it failed to do so. It also failed to announce that many big games in its beloved franchises. I'm excited for Astrobot. It's not quite the same thing as Ghost of Tsushima 2 or something from Santa Monica or Naughty Dog. So, all that said, Sony is in an interesting position where it is comfortably beating its competition, but without any big games announced that are coming, really big games, and no new hardware announced. It's a little bit hard to be excited about the PlayStation 5 right now. Max, do you think the PS5 Pro is coming, and if so, when?
I do think it's coming. I think it's going to happen eventually. We fall into this trap of thinking that Sony is going to announce things in the sort of the shape of the thing that used to be E3, that sort of summer window. We're very used to that being the time of the year when big announcements get made. But if you look at Sony's recent track record, even going back to when E3 was still happening, they weren't really using that time slot to make huge announcements that often. And I guess the PS5 got sort of a hardware reveal that took place in June, but we didn't get an MSRP or a release date until September. And then the same was true of the PlayStation VR got kind of officially revealed. They announced its existence. They said it was in the works around CES of 2021. And we didn't know what the actual deal was on that thing until November, and then it came out in February. Looking at the PS4 Pro, that got shown off. I think they alluded to a PlayStation 4 Neo was the working title, the sort of code name they had at the time, and that got revealed in September, ahead of a November release window. So I really do think that there's less of a roadmap for a half measure console like this than we might expect. Yeah, I don't know. If it's coming later this year, I feel like we're going to see it in September. And if it's coming maybe early next year, November seems safe. I do think these things kind of line up with the earnings reports and quarterly financial summaries, that sort of thing. But at the same time, Sony's been, they've been fairly playing things close to the chest. They've been very quiet, and that applies to the first-party video game titles that they presumably have in the works. But they also, we got scolded on Beyond for referring to Sony's big summer showcase as a state of play, which is the sort of state of play is the smaller scale announcement, consumer direct type thing. And we called it a state of play, and everyone said, no, it's going to be a showcase. It's going to be a big, huge showcase. And then sure enough, it was just a state of play. And I think we all pretty much agree here that Sony had probably the weakest showing of the big three during this summer events season, whatever you want to call it. So I'm hoping that we get a big thing in September, whether that's a look ahead at what's coming next year with the announcement of the PS5 Pro. Even if it's just a standalone thing where they say, hey, great news, the PS5 Pro is coming along. Here's a look at how much prettier your favorite games will look on this new machine, and keep an eye out for GTA 6 next year. Pre-order today. It's underwhelming, but it's also, again, it's a half measure. It's not the most exciting thing in the world. We're all trying to figure out exactly what the selling point of this thing is, aside from GTA 6. But Yeah, I think Sony's within their rights to not be, banging the hype drum too hard with this whole thing.
Now, Ryan, Xbox also has some expected hardware that might be considered MIA, but first, what's your thoughts on the PlayStation 5 Pro? Is it coming, and maybe when?
Well, I'll tell you, I started to doubt it, which was sort of the genesis of when the three of us were talking about our topic for this week's episode. And until you and Max went and looked up the actual history on the PS4 Pro, and it's like, they didn't actually announce that thing until September of 2016. And so, okay, yeah, I guess even though it feels like it should have been announced by now, historically, there's not a comp for that it would actually be still in about 2 more months from now. And so I guess that's, the past precedent is what we can look to for now. I personally don't see Sony doing a standalone live stream, showcase, whatever you want to call it, for this console, because it just seems like it's going to kind of turbocharge things a little bit in terms of the ray tracing, but that's probably not going to come across super well on a stream, to the point where I just don't see them doing a dedicated, 15 to 20, 25, whatever minute long showcase state of play just to reveal the PS5 Pro. I think it would probably be more likely that it would be on the back of a larger traditional PlayStation showcase with a bunch of other games. Maybe we get a new Wolverine trailer or something else from one of the other first parties, and also the PS5 Pro would be in there as part of that. That's what I personally think is the more likely scenario here.